Moving into my son's house was never part of the plan. I had worked 40 years as a surveyor, saving what I could, but medical bills from my late wife's cancer treatment had drained our nest egg dry. So, at 72, I found myself packing my entire life into 3 cardboard boxes and a battered leather suitcase. I stood in the guest room of Michael's pristine, modern suburban home, feeling like an intruder. The walls were painted a sterile shade of greige, and there wasn't a single personal item in sight. It looked more like a dentist's waiting room than a home. My daughter-in-law, Brenda, stood in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest. She was a woman who believed that if an object didn't spark joy, or match her beige aesthetic, it needed to be incinerated. "Arthur," she said, her voice tight with forced politeness. "We are happy to have you, but we have rules. We keep a minimalist home. No clutter. No hoarding. Everything has a place, and if it doesn't have a place, it goes." She eyed my worn-out suitcase with disdain. I nodded, swallowing my pride. "I understand, Brenda. I won't be a burden." I didn't tell her that inside that suitcase was the only thing of value I had left, a collection of papers that she would undoubtedly consider trash. The first week was an exercise in walking on eggshells. I spent most of my time in the small guest room, trying to make myself invisible. Michael was busy with work, leaving early and coming home late, looking exhausted. He gave me apologetic smiles but never challenged Brenda. It was clear who ran the household. Brenda spent her days reorganizing things that were already organized, labeling plastic bins, and watching home design shows that preached the gospel of throwing things away. I kept my old papers in a shoebox under the bed. It wasn't just random debris, it was a collection of history. There were letters from my grandfather, old land deeds, and maps from the 1920s. To Brenda, they were fire hazards. To me, they were a tangible connection to a past where things were built to last. I would take the box out at night, tracing the faded ink with my fingers, remembering the stories my father told me. There was one document in particular, a heavy, yellowed sheet with an intricate border and a wax seal, that I treated with extra care. It looked like a prop from a movie, but I knew it was real. I just didn't know how much the world had changed around it. "What is that smell?" Brenda asked one morning at breakfast, wrinkling her nose. I paused, my spoon hovering over my oatmeal. "I don't smell anything," Michael mumbled, scrolling through emails on his phone. Brenda glared at me. "It smells like old library. Like dust and decay." She stood up and walked over to me, sniffing the air near my shoulder. "It's coming from you, Arthur. Or rather, from your room. Have you been bringing in trash?" "I don't collect trash, Brenda," I said quietly. "I have my personal documents. They are old. Paper smells when it ages." She rolled her eyes, a gesture she had perfected. "Paper invites silverfish. It invites mold. We have a hypoallergenic house, Arthur. We can't have you hoarding rotting cellulose in the guest room." I felt a flash of anger, but I tamped it down. I was a guest. A non-paying guest. "I'll keep the window cracked," I offered. She didn't look appeased. "Just get rid of it. Scan it and throw it out. Nobody keeps physical paper anymore. It's 2024. I simply nodded, knowing I would never let her near that box. The tension came to a head on a Tuesday. I had a checkup at the clinic, and since Michael was working, I had to take the bus. It was a long trip, and I was gone for most of the day. When I left, the house was silent. Brenda was in the backyard practicing yoga, ignoring my wave goodbye. I made sure my door was closed and the shoebox was pushed deep under the bed, hidden behind my winter boots. I felt a strange sense of foreboding as I walked to the bus stop, a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with my cholesterol levels. I spent the bus ride thinking about that specific document in the box. It was a bearer bond, issued in 1924 by a mining conglomerate that had long since dissolved. My father had given it to me, telling me it was insurance. For years, I thought it was worthless, a souvenir from a bankrupt company. But recently, I had read an article about old corporate mergers and acquisitions. That mining company hadn't just disappeared, it had been acquired, split, acquired again, and eventually absorbed into one of the largest tech manufacturing firms in the world. I hadn't told Michael or Brenda because I wanted to be sure first. I needed to get it appraised. When I returned home that afternoon, the atmosphere in the house had changed. It smelled aggressively of lemon polish and bleach. The air felt thinner, sharper. I walked into the living room, and everything seemed to shine with a terrifying brightness. Brenda was in the kitchen, humming to herself, chopping vegetables with a rhythmic thwack thwack thwack. She looked up as I entered, a beatific smile on her face. It was the smile of someone who had accomplished a great task. "You're back early," she said, her voice singing. "How was the doctor?" "Fine," I said, eyeing her warily. "Everything looks clean." "Oh, I did a deep clean," she said, pointing the knife at me playfully. "I decided to declutter the guest room. You know, to help you settle in better. Feng shui, and all that." My blood ran cold. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. You went in my room?" I stammered. "I told you I didn't want my things touched." I didn't wait for her answer. I dropped my jacket on the floor and ran, to the guest room. I threw the door open. The room was transformed. The bed was made with military precision. The windows were open. The nightstand was clear of my reading glasses and book. But my eyes went immediately to the space under the bed. I fell to my knees, ignoring the pain in my joints, and lifted the dust ruffle. Empty. The space was completely empty. No winter boots. No suitcase. And no shoebox. I scrambled up, frantically checking the closet. Empty. "Brenda!" I screamed, a sound that tore from my throat like a wounded animal. She appeared in the doorway, looking annoyed rather than guilty. "Arthur, stop shouting. You'll scare the neighbors." "Where is it?" I demanded, my hands shaking. "Where is the box that was under my bed?" She sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "That box of trash?" "Arthur, it was full of yellow, crumbling paper. It was a fire hazard. I tossed it." "You tossed it?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "You had no right. Those were my personal property." Brenda scoffed, inspecting her fingernails. "It was junk, Arthur. Old maps, scribbles, a weird certificate that looked like a prop. I did you a favor. I digitized your life. Well, I didn't scan them because they were falling apart, but I cleared the energy. You should thank me. The room feels so much lighter now." "Where is it?" I grabbed her shoulders, something I had never done. She flinched, her eyes widening in shock. "Don't touch me. It's in the recycling bin. Outside." I didn't apologize. I pushed past her and ran out the front door. The driveway was empty. The large blue recycling bins that usually sat by the garage were gone. I looked down the street. It was Tuesday. Tuesday was trash day. The bins were pulled back up to the garage, empty and waiting. I stood in the driveway, staring at the empty plastic bins. A hollow, ringing sound filled my ears. I felt like I was underwater. The garbage truck. It had already come. I turned back to the house, where Brenda was watching me from the porch, her arms crossed. "The truck came at 2 p.m., she called out, sounding vindicated. "You missed it by an hour. Ideally, you should have thanked me for handling the chores." I walked back to her, my face pale. "You just threw away my life," I said. "And you threw away my future." She rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. It was old paper." I walked past her into the house and grabbed the landline phone. I dialed Michael's number. He answered on the second ring. "Dad? Is everything okay?" "Come home," I said, my voice flat and dead. "Now. Or I'm calling the police on your wife for theft." Michael arrived 20 minutes later, looking panicked. He found me sitting on the sofa, staring at the wall, while Brenda paced the kitchen, ranting about how ungrateful I was. "He grabbed me, Michael," she shrieked. "I clean his room, I make it nice, and he assaults me over a box of kindling." Michael looked at me, torn. "Dad, what is going on? What was in the box?" "My past," I said. "And a bearer bond from 1924. Brenda laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "A bond? From 1924? Dad, listen to yourself. You're senile. It's worthless paper. Companies go bankrupt." I looked at Michael. It was an uncancelled Series A bond for the Copper Creek Mining Corporation. I was going to get it appraised tomorrow. "I didn't tell you because I wanted to surprise you. I wanted to pay off your mortgage." The room went silent. Michael's face went slack. "Copper Creek," he whispered. "Dad, isn't that the company that held the land rights to the Lithium Valley?" Brenda looked between us, the first flicker of doubt crossing her face. "Lithium? What are you talking about?" Michael ignored her. He pulled out his phone and started typing furiously. "If it's the bond I'm thinking of. Dad, those are collector's items. Even without the equity, they are worth thousands. But if it's convertible." He stopped typing and looked at me, his eyes wide. "We need to get that box back." "It's gone," Brenda snapped, though her voice lacked its usual bite. "The truck took it to the transfer station. It's buried under tons of garbage by now. It's gone." I stood up. The despair was replaced by a cold, hard determination. "Then we go to the transfer station." "I'm not digging in trash," Brenda said immediately. "I am not going to the dump." "Then stay here," I said. "Michael, drive me. Now." The drive to the municipal waste transfer station was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Michael drove fast, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He called the sanitation department on the way, trying to get a hold of a supervisor. "Yes, this is an emergency. Accidental disposal of valuable legal documents." "Yes, we're on our way." He looked at me. "Dad, are you sure it was in the box?" "I put it there this morning," I said. "It was in a blue envelope at the bottom." I watched the city pass by, praying to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. That bond was my exit strategy. It was my way of buying freedom from Brenda's beige tyranny. If it was gone, I would die in that guest room, listening to her complain about my existence. I couldn't let that happen. We arrived at the facility. It was a massive industrial complex that smelled of rot and diesel fumes. Seagulls swarmed overhead, their cries sounding like mocking laughter. We were stopped at the gate by a man in a yellow vest. "Public drop-off is closed," he grunted. Michael leaned out the window. I spoke to Supervisor Higgins. "My name is Michael. We're looking for a specific truck's load from the west side suburbs." The guard checked his clipboard and waved us through. We parked near the main hangar, a cavernous building where trucks dumped their loads onto a concrete floor before bulldozers pushed it into compactors. The noise was deafening. Supervisor Higgins met us. He was a big man with grease on his face. "You the guys looking for the paper?" he asked. "Truck 402 came in from your sector about 40 minutes ago. It just dumped." He pointed to a mountain of trash bags in the center of the floor. "That pile right there. You got 20 minutes before the loader pushes it into the pit. Once it's in the pit, it's gone." I didn't wait for permission. I ran toward the pile. "Dad, wait!" Michael yelled, grabbing a pair of gloves from the supervisor and running after me. The smell hit me instantly: sour milk, rotting meat, and wet cardboard. It was overpowering, but I breathed through my mouth and started tearing at bags. "What color was the bag?" Michael shouted, ripping open a white kitchen bag. "It wasn't a bag," I yelled back. "She said she put it in the recycling bin. It would be loose. Or in a paper bag." We were looking for loose debris in a mountain of refuse. It felt impossible. But then I remembered Brenda's obsession. She separates. I shouted. She wouldn't put paper with wet trash. Look for the recycling load. Truck 402 had a split hopper. Higgins whistled. Right. Recycling is on the left side of the pile. Over there. We shifted our focus to a pile of cardboard and plastic. We dug. I clawed through cereal boxes, soda cans, and endless stacks of junk mail. My hands were covered in grime. My back screamed in protest. But I kept digging. I saw Michael next to me, ruining his suit trousers, sweating profusely. For the first time in years, I felt like we were a team. Dad, look for the shoebox, he yelled. It was a brown loafer's box, right? Yes. Size 10. Time was running out. The massive bulldozer engine revved up on the other side of the hangar. 5 minutes. Higgins shouted. I can't hold the line forever. I started kicking piles of newspapers over. Then I saw it. A familiar, battered lid peeking out from under a pile of pizza boxes. There. I scrambled over a mound of plastic bottles and grabbed the box. It was crushed on one side, damp with something sticky that looked like soda. I held it to my chest, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would explode. I got it. I yelled. Michael rushed over. Open it. Is it inside? I sat down on a stack of newspapers and pried the lid off. The contents were jumbled. The old maps were torn. My grandfather's letters were stained with cola. But at the bottom, protected by the stiff blue envelope I had placed it in, was the bond. I pulled it out. The envelope was bent, but the document inside. I slid it out. The intricate border was intact. The wax seal was cracked but present. It was dry. I let out a sob of relief, clutching the paper to my chest. Michael slumped against a bale of cardboard, laughing hysterically. We found it, he gasped. We actually found it. Higgins walked over, shaking his head. You folks are the luckiest idiots I've seen all month. Better be worth a lot to dive in this muck. I looked up at him, tears streaming down my dirty face. It is, I said. It really is. We drove home in silence, the windows down to air out the smell of the dump. I held the envelope in my lap, refusing to let go. When we walked into the house, we looked like we had been to war. Brenda was sitting on the couch, watching TV. She looked up, wrinkling her nose. You smell disgusting, she said. Did you find your trash? I didn't answer her. I walked straight to the kitchen table and laid the bond down. Michael, I said. Call the appraisal house in the city. The one that specializes in historical financial instruments. Brenda stood up and walked over, looking at the dirty, yellowed paper. That's it, she sneered. That's what you rolled around in. Garbage for? It looks like a placemat. Shut up, Brenda, Michael said, his voice quiet but firm. She recoiled as if slapped. Excuse me. I said shut up. Dad, I'm calling them now. Brenda stood there, fuming, as Michael made the appointment. She stormed out of the room, slamming the bedroom door. She didn't believe us. She thought we were delusional. The next day, we went to the auction house. I had cleaned the bond as best I could, placing it in a rigid protective sleeve. The appraiser, a man named Mr. Sterling with white gloves and a magnifying glass, examined it for 45 minutes. The silence in the room was suffocating. Finally, he looked up, removing his loupe. Mr. Vance, he said. This is a remarkable find. It is a Series A bearer bond issued by Copper Creek in 1924. Crucially, it includes the gold clause and the rights to the mineral deposits on the designated land. Most of these were cashed in or cancelled during the Great Depression. This one is active. What is it worth? Michael asked, his voice shaking. Mr. Sterling tapped a calculator. With the accrued interest, the collector value, and the current value of the lithium rights held by the parent company. I would conservatively estimate the value at $1.9 million. The room spun. $1.9 million. I gripped the edge of the desk to keep from falling. Michael looked like he was going to vomit. Million, he squeaked. Yes, Sterling said. We can facilitate the sale to the parent company or put it to auction. I recommend auction. The bidding war will be significant. We walked out of the office in a daze. I was a millionaire. The old paper that Brenda had tossed in the recycling bin was worth more than her entire life's earnings. We got in the car. Michael turned to me, his eyes shining. Dad, this changes everything. We can pay off the house. We can start a business. We. He stopped, seeing the look on my face. We. I asked gently. Michael looked down. I mean, it's your money, of course. But we're family. And we helped you find it. I looked out the window. You helped me, Michael. But you also let your wife treat me like a nuisance in my own home. You let her throw away my life. Michael flinched. She didn't know, Dad. She's sorry. Is she? I asked. Or will she be sorry only when she hears the number? We drove home in silence again, but this time, the silence was heavy with unspoken truths. When we pulled into the driveway, Brenda was waiting. She saw our faces and crossed her arms. Well, was it worth the gas money? Michael walked past her. Sit down, Brenda. She blinked. What? Sit down. She sat at the dining table, looking confused. I stood at the head of the table. The bond is genuine, I said. It is valued at $1.9 million. Brenda's jaw dropped. Literally dropped. She stared at me, then at the paper, then at Michael. You're lying, she whispered. Michael, tell me he's lying. He's not, Michael said. Mr. Sterling confirmed it. The color rushed into Brenda's cheeks. Her eyes suddenly became very bright, very alert. The disdain vanished, replaced by a hungry, predatory warmth. Oh, Arthur, she exclaimed, reaching for my hand. That is amazing. I knew you were holding onto something special. I'm so sorry about the mix-up yesterday. I was just trying to keep the house tidy for us. I pulled my hand away. The mix-up. I repeated. You threw my property in the trash. You called it kindling. You mocked me. Oh, we were just stressed. Brenda waved a hand dismissively. But look at this blessing. We can finally renovate the kitchen. And we can build an in-law suite for you in the back. You can have your own space. I looked at her. I saw the greed radiating off her like heat waves. She was already spending my money. She was already planning how to keep me contained in an in-law suite, while she enjoyed the spoils of the trash she tried to destroy. There will be no renovations, I said calmly. What do you mean? Brenda asked, her smile faltering. We have to be smart with this money. I am going to be smart, I said. I am selling the bond. And then I am buying a condo in the city. For myself. The silence in the room was deafening. Dad, Michael said. You can't live alone. You need us. I lived alone for 2 years after your mother died, I said. I was fine. I only came here because I was broke. I am not broke anymore. Brenda stood up, her face turning ugly. You can't just leave. We took you in. We fed you. You owe us. I owe you. I laughed. I owe you for the room where you threw away my possessions? I think the stress you caused me cancels out the rent, Brenda. That bond is household property, Brenda spat, her voice raising to a shriek. You brought it into our house. It was in our trash. By law, once it's in the trash, it's public domain. Or it belongs to the house. She was grasping at straws, desperate, illogical straws. Michael looked at her in horror. Brenda, stop. You can't be serious. I am serious, she yelled. We deserve a cut. We saved it. Michael drove you there. I looked at Michael. He was looking at his wife like he was seeing a stranger. I drove him, Michael said softly. But you threw it away. You don't get a cut for creating the disaster, Brenda. I moved out 3 days later. I didn't wait for the auction money to clear. I took a bridge loan and hired professional movers. I bought a beautiful apartment overlooking the park. It has a library. A big one. With mahogany shelves where I keep all my old papers on display. Michael visits me once a week. He comes alone. He and Brenda are separated. Apparently, seeing her try to claim legal ownership of my trash was the final straw for him. He realized that her minimalism applied to her heart as well. It was empty. I helped him with a down payment on a small place of his own. As for the bond, it sold for $2.1 million. I donated a chunk of it to the Historical Society. Every time I sit in my library, smelling the old paper and the leather books, I think about that recycling bin. Brenda wanted to clear the energy in her house. Well, she succeeded. She cleared me out, and she cleared her husband out. Now she has all the empty beige space she ever wanted. And I have my treasure. My new life in the city was everything I had dreamed of, yet it was shadowed by a lingering bitterness. The auction had been a whirlwind of gavels and gasps, and watching the final price climb to $2.1 million felt surreal. But money, as they say, doesn't solve everything. It just changes the problems. My problem was loneliness. The library was beautiful, filled with rare first editions and maps I had spent a fortune acquiring, but it was quiet. Too quiet. I missed Michael. I missed the son I had raised, the boy who used to help me survey land in the summers. Michael was trying. He visited every Sunday for lunch. We would sit on my balcony, watching the city traffic below, eating sandwiches from the deli down the street. He looked lighter without Brenda, but also lost. He was living in a small studio apartment near his office, rebuilding his life from scratch. The divorce proceedings were ugly. Brenda was fighting for every penny, claiming emotional distress, and demanding half of his future earnings. She even tried to claim a stake in the bond money, arguing that since she found the box by deciding to clean the room, she was entitled to a finder's fee. My lawyer, a shark named Mr. Sterling, no relation to the appraiser, oddly enough, had laughed her out of the deposition room. But the stress was eating Michael alive. She's relentless, Dad, Michael said one Sunday, rubbing his temples. She wants the house. She wants the car. She wants alimony. She even wants the dog, and she hates that dog. I looked at him, feeling a surge of protective anger. She gets nothing from me, I said firmly. And she gets nothing from you that she didn't earn. The house is in your name, right? Michael nodded. Bought it before we got married. But she's claiming she added value by curating the interior. Curating? I snorted. Throwing things away isn't curating. It's destruction. Michael managed a weak smile. I know. But the legal fees are draining me. I might have to sell the house just to pay the lawyers. I put my hand on his shoulder. No, you won't. I'll cover the legal fees. Consider it an early inheritance. We are going to fight her, Michael. We are going to win. The divorce trial was scheduled for 3 months later. In the meantime, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years: travel. I booked a trip to the old Copper Creek mining site in Nevada. I wanted to see where my fortune had come from. I hired a private guide, a young geologist named Sarah who was fascinated by the history of the area. We drove out in a sturdy Jeep, traversing dusty roads that hadn't seen traffic since the 1930s. When we arrived at the site, it was a ghost town. Rusted machinery sat silent in the sun. The mine entrance was boarded up. But Sarah showed me the geological surveys. See this seam here? She pointed to a map. This is the lithium deposit. It runs deep. Your bond wasn't just paper, Arthur. It was a claim on the future of energy. Batteries. Electric cars. This whole valley is going to be reopened soon. I stood there, looking at the desolate landscape, feeling a profound connection to the past. My father had held on to that bond through the Depression, through wars, through poverty. He had known, somehow, that it mattered. When I returned from Nevada, I felt reinvigorated. I had a purpose now. I wasn't just a rich old man, I was a steward of history. I started a small foundation dedicated to preserving industrial heritage sites. I donated to museums. I even funded a scholarship for geology students at the local university. It felt good to give back, to use the money for something other than revenge. But Brenda wasn't done. One afternoon, I received a certified letter. It was a lawsuit. Brenda was suing me directly. Not Michael. Me. The charge was unjust enrichment and conversion of property. She claimed that by discarding the box, she had legally abandoned it, but since it was on her property when I retrieved it, I had technically stolen her garbage. It was legally absurd, a Hail Mary pass from a desperate woman. But it meant I had to see her in court. The court date arrived. Brenda walked in wearing a modest dress, looking like the picture of a wronged housewife. She had a new lawyer, a flashy guy who looked like he advertised on bus benches. My lawyer, Mr. Sterling, looked bored. The judge, a stern woman with glasses on a chain, read the complaint and frowned. "Let me get this straight," she said, looking over her spectacles at Brenda. "You are suing your father-in-law for retrieving his own property, which you threw away without his consent, from a public transfer station?" "It was on my property," Brenda insisted, her voice shrill. "The recycling bin is part of the curtilage of the home. He had no right to dig through it. And since I threw it away, it became property of the waste management company, and he stole it from them, which means he has unclean hands." The mental gymnastics were impressive. The judge rubbed her forehead. "Mrs. Vance, did you or did you not refer to the items as trash multiple times?" Brenda hesitated. "Well, yes, but—" "And did you intend to permanently deprive Mr. Vance of these items?" "Yes, because they were clutter." "Then you abandoned the property. Case dismissed with prejudice. And Mrs. Vance? You are ordered to pay Mr. Vance's legal fees for this frivolous action." Brenda stormed out of the courtroom, red-faced and screaming at her lawyer. It was the last time I ever saw her in person. The defeat broke her spirit, or at least her bank account. She settled the divorce with Michael a week later, taking a modest lump sum and leaving the house. Michael moved back in, but he couldn't stand the beige walls anymore. He started painting. Deep blues, warm terracottas, greens. He filled the house with plants and books. He even got a dog, a scruffy terrier mix named Barnaby. I visited him a month after the divorce was finalized. The house looked alive again. "It feels like a home now," I said, looking around. Michael smiled, handing me a beer. "It does. And Dad, I found something." He led me to the garage. In the corner, dusty but intact, was my old leather suitcase. "She didn't throw this out," he said. "She hid it in the attic. I found it when I was moving boxes." I opened the suitcase. Inside were clothes, old photos, and a small wooden box I thought was lost forever. It contained my wife's jewelry. Her wedding ring. Her favorite locket. I had assumed Brenda had pawned them or tossed them. Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you, Michael." "I'm sorry it took so long," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have stood up to her sooner. I should have protected you." "You stood up when it mattered," I said. "We got the bond. We got the truth. And we got each other back." We sat on the porch, watching the sunset, two men who had weathered a storm and come out the other side. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. I split my time between my apartment and traveling. I went to Europe, visiting the towns where my grandfather had lived. I bought a rare map of Paris from 1750. I started writing a memoir, not for publication, but for Michael. I wanted him to know the full story of our family, the struggles and the triumphs, so he would never forget where he came from. One day, I got a call from the Historical Society. They wanted to honor me at their annual gala for my contributions. I was hesitant, I hated the spotlight, but Michael insisted. "You deserve it, Dad. You saved a piece of history." So I agreed. The gala was a black tie affair held in a grand ballroom. I wore a tuxedo for the first time in 40 years. Michael was my date, looking handsome in his own suit. During the speech, I stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. I held up a replica of the bearer bond. "This piece of paper," I said, my voice amplifying through the room, "was considered trash. It was discarded because it didn't fit a modern aesthetic. It was old. It smelled like dust. But it held value beyond measure. Not just monetary value, but historical value. It represented a promise kept." I paused, looking at Michael in the front row. We live in a world that is quick to throw things away. Relationships, memories, objects. We want the new, the shiny, the minimal. But I am here to tell you that there is worth in the old. There is dignity in the worn. And sometimes, the greatest treasures are found in the things we are quickest to dismiss. The applause was thunderous. Michael beamed at me, clapping the hardest. After the gala, a woman approached me. She was elegant, with silver hair and kind eyes. "Mr. Vance," she said, "that was a beautiful speech. My name is Eleanor. I'm a curator at the City Museum." We started talking. We talked about maps. We talked about history. We talked about the bond. For the first time since my wife died, I felt a spark of interest in someone new. Eleanor and I started having coffee. Then dinner. She had a cluttered, cozy apartment filled with books and art. She didn't mind the smell of old paper, she loved it. Michael teased me about my girlfriend, but he was happy for me. "You deserve to be happy, Dad," he said. "You've spent enough time surviving. It's time to live." 2 years later, I was 80. I celebrated my birthday in Michael's backyard. The beige was completely gone now. The garden was lush and overgrown in the best way. Barnaby the dog was chasing a ball. Eleanor was there, laughing with Michael. I sat in a lawn chair, a paper plate of cake on my lap, feeling a deep, abiding contentment. I received a letter from Brenda that week. It was forwarded by her lawyer. She was asking for a loan. She had made some bad investments and was in debt. I read the letter twice. Then, I took a pen and wrote a single sentence on a piece of stationery. "I'm sorry, but my assets are tied up in preserving history." I mailed it back. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel smug. I just felt finished. She was a chapter 1 had closed. I decided to update my own will. I sat down with Mr. Sterling and laid it all out. The bulk of the estate would go to Michael, of course. But I left a generous endowment to the foundation, and a special bequest to Eleanor. And there was one more thing. I had kept the crushed, stained shoebox from the dump. I had it encased in a glass display box. "This," I told Mr. Sterling, "goes to Michael." With a note. The note read, "To remind you that even when things look like garbage, you have to look deeper. And to remind you to never let anyone throw away your past." It was eccentric, perhaps, but I was a millionaire. I was allowed to be eccentric. I sit here now in my library, looking at the city lights. The bond money bought me comfort, yes. But the journey gave me something more. It gave me my son back. It gave me a voice. And it taught me that value is subjective. To Brenda, I was clutter. To the world, I was a wealthy man. But to myself, I was simply Arthur Vance, a surveyor who finally found his way home. The old papers are safe now. My story is written. And as I close this journal, I know that when I am gone, I won't be tossed aside. I will be remembered. Not for the money but for the fight. And that, in the end, is the only legacy worth leaving.